What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this episode. My company helps high-growth software companies recruit top software sales leaders and salespeople. Go to thejddavidgroup.com to learn more. My guest today is Matthew Davis. He's the VP of Sales for Feedback Loop, which is an agile research platform that helps companies learn faster and innovate smarter. Matt, welcome to Over Quota.
Jay, great to be here. I'm really excited to spend some time with you today.
I'm excited to have you. So let's just start with what I just ended with. Talk to me a little bit about Feedback Loop. And also, when you and I first talked, Feedback Loop was under a different name. So give me a sense of the evolution of that, why that came about, and then also your role there at Feedback Loop.
Yeah, so again, I'm really excited to be here. But so we did a brand change. October 1st is when we announced the brand change from Alpha to Feedback Loop. And really, what's interesting about a brand change is that it's like the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much that's happening underneath the waterline that was, really the brand change was a culmination of all that work that's been happening. So to give a little bit more insight, so Rob Holland, who's our CEO, he joined us in December of last year. And one of the things that we set out to do in 2020 was really make sure that our organization is built to scale. So that means we had to kind of take on a little bit of a mantra. We kind of took on the nail it to scale it. And that means we had to get some fundamentals right. We had to get some people in the right places. But more importantly, we had to kind of re-examine who we were as a brand, but also re-examine our value to our customers. That's the most important thing. And upon asking a lot of our customers, which ultimately, our platform is to talk to customers, so our customers can talk to their prospective customers. We found out that there's two things that are pretty valuable about it. And the first one is that they are able to reach out and get information and opinions from people that they would like to either be their customers or people that look like their customers. And they're able to do so in such a fashion that it creates a feedback loop. And we kept hearing that a lot. And then what was also interesting is kind of the double meaning of it, which is we have one of the only platforms that is really truly designed that researchers and non-researchers can actually be in the platform, learn together on things, collaborate on various issues, so that ultimately the business can get products and services to market faster, but also backed with research. And that you'd be surprised how many things go to market based on a gut or just a rushed idea and end up costing millions of dollars. So that also was a feedback loop. So we were really excited about that. Alpha was really created way back in the day, 5 years ago, because it was kind of a nod to, before beta, you should be doing testing. And as we've grown, we've realized that there's just something a bit more powerful than that. And there's a lot more activity on the platform that's beyond just that. So it's been really exciting. And what it doesn't, a brand change doesn't matter unless we put our money where our mouth is. And we've doubled down on our investment on a product. And we've had two of the largest releases that we've had this year. And we've essentially almost just like the company, we've restructured our product so that it can also scale. So we're really excited about that. And our customers right now, we're slowly rolling out a new interactive reporting feature, and the customers are just raving about it. So a lot has gone on into that. That was probably too long of an explanation, but that's the story of the brand change.
No, absolutely. And so let me ask you, you've said a couple of things that I want to follow up on. You said nail it to scale it. And then you said in that same sort of context, you said get our fundamentals right. I'm curious, tell me more about that. When you say fundamentals, get our fundamentals right, what fundamentals were you aiming and probably continuing to get right and to nail?
I think, so when we really took a step, so when we in Q1, we did, when we could still get together in person, we did an executive offsite. And, it was really interesting to just take this introspective look at the business and go like, what's working and what's not working. And one of the things that, I think we realized is that from a company perspective, the interdepartmental connection was really broken. Mm-hmm. So demand gen was not necessarily fueling the sales team, the new business team. The new business team was not necessarily because we thought that there was a certain amount of leads coming in, we didn't necessarily know how many opportunities. So there was some math things that we were just not necessarily built and playing around. It was kind of like, let's just go out, startup mentality. Let's go try to sell. Let's get a pipeline that's 3 to 5x. And what we found is that it actually, just when you started kind of peeling the onion back, is that it wasn't as sound as we wanted it to. So for me, in my particular role, so I'm the VP of sales for the new business team. Some of the fundamentals that I found is that, I love the basics of selling, which is like, I want sellers that love to prospect, love to do research on their customers. They love to prepare for a really great experience. They say things and then they shut up and listen. It's those kind of fundamentals that you realize that no fancy process or no fancy deck or whatever is not, even a demo is not going to necessarily help unless you're doing the work to get that. So, and I think we saw that across all the departments, and really looking at like, okay, well, how do we gauge our customer health, and how do we report on that? How do we gauge the quality of an outbound, the quality of a lead? How do we get feedback from a people perspective? How do we get feedback from our people and set some benchmarks and some goals to create a better working environment? How do we create an operating rhythm that works in a world that's completely virtual? And so I think those are just some examples that we, and I will tell you, it's a humbling experience to go through, when you realize that as you peel the onion back. And that's why having a great leader like our CEO, Rob, he does it in a way that's like challenging, but it's also not like, it's not being a jerk. It's really like at the core of it is like, does everybody around this table want to create a great experience for each other, for the people that work for us, and for ourselves? And that's pretty cool.
How did you operationalize that? In other words, so you have a meeting, you decide that it's interconnected, right? It's disconnected, I guess, right? It's not connected the way it should be, as integrated as every function should be. What did that look like operationally? In other words, did that cause you to remove some parts to the puzzle that were unnecessary, like redundancies? Did that mean adding, more to the team? Did it mean, what did it mean to actually fix it all and to get it? What did you have to do?
So I'll just specifically for the new business team, we were overstaffed.
Okay.
So, our quota, we didn't have reps that were fully hitting we're close to their quotas, because the quotas were set on a very different metric last year. So, that was a couple of the one big changes we were looking at. And a lot of startups are like this. When you're one size, you look at MRR. As you get to a larger size, your ARR. And so we kind of made that transition. Our goals were set on a very different thing. So when we kind of started looking at everything, like, whoa, we have way too much capacity for where we're at. So that was excuse me, that was a difficult piece to obviously to downsize the new business team. Around the rest of the organization, what was really interesting is, the first question we had to kind of look at is like, how do we measure some of this stuff? Like, what best practices do we use to kind of set some just at least some benchmarks for us to go after and take a look at? And then really, we as an executive team, we made a lot of commitments, and this by this, this is what we're going to do. And it was everything from operationalizing, essentially like what the teams are going to look like and how we're going to behave, to redefining our job descriptions and our people's job descriptions, retooling our hiring and recruiting process, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is we redid our values and really took a look at, excuse me, really took a look at who are we today? So it was, and like I said, so we started that process in late December, early January, and the culmination was October 1st. So it was a lot of work, and it's still ongoing. It's not one of those things where we're like,
yeah, right. Yeah, something like that can't be. It has to just be ongoing always, right? The feedback loop, right? It has to just be, you're constantly iterating and improving.
It's like not that I've ever done this, but it's akin to like you're climbing a mountain and you get to the peak and you're like, yes. And then like the fog clears and then you're like, oh God,
Right.
we've got a long way to go. But and
Right.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think too, the pandemic has been horrible at so many levels, but if anything, what it did for us as a company is it gave us the time it gave us a little air cover to just be really introspective and set ourselves up for the next few years versus like, what are we going to do this next quarter? And that's pretty cool and pretty powerful to be able to like, I know exactly what I need to do for the next 7 months.
Right.
Like, and that creates, I don't have to worry about like, where am I? What am I doing? I know exactly what my goals are. I know exactly what our team needs to do. I know exactly when they should be ramping, and that's the outcome of all that's like the culmination of all that work that we did beforehand to really understand how all the pieces fit together.
2 follow-up questions to that. Beforehand, was it that it was hard to see the forest through the trees, so to speak? In other words, it
Totally.
was right.
Yeah,
Right.
totally. It was like, it was, it was not chaotic, but it wasn't, I think we were doing the best we could with kind of the parameters that we were working within. And, ultimately we really entered a space early and, quite frankly, kind of like blazed a trail into this kind of what we now call agile research, but it wasn't called agile research back then. And then we didn't invest in our product. And that's ultimately what led to us getting a new CEO who was very product driven, very research driven. He's like the perfect storm of like exactly the kind of CEO we need. And he's just a great human. And, ultimately that was tough to do. So, when you have that kind of situation, you start to lose confidence in like what customers really value about you. And so that's difficult to sell in that environment.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. You mentioned the job description in terms of retooling some things, including job description. And also you talked about sort of an MRR mindset to going to an ARR mindset. What did you need to change in the job description to attract the kind of people that you wanted to starting to attract going forward? Because I would imagine, just like most startups, right? You start off with an ideal of saying, okay, here are the reps that we want to hire and that we need to hire for this, because we're selling mid-market or we're selling SMB or whatever it is that you're selling. And then all of a sudden things evolve and you're like, okay, now we need to upskill. We need a different skill set now based on what the market is telling us and based on what our customers are telling us and all that. So what changed in the job description that is really material at this point?
I think so. The first thing is that we had a team that was really good at selling to a mindset of like a UX researcher or product manager, which is still the product management piece is vitally important. But what was lacking on our sales team is research expertise and knowledge. And that could be in the form of even just like a support role or people that have actually sold into researchers. So I think that was a big pivot as I started looking at some new looking at resumes and really started to refresh some things. The other thing that this is actually super interesting. There's certain things that stick out to me on a resume. And so while I was creating the job descriptions, I was just going on LinkedIn and just, basically Googling and, researching on the thing and just looking at profiles and being like, what pops out? Like, what do I want? What I like? And two of the things that really stood out to me is I love when someone's worked at a company for 3+ years. That means, especially in the sales role, because that means they can hit their goal. I like 4. 4 is incredible. That just means that they're achieving. And the other thing I started really liking, and I didn't realize that most people don't do this, is just people that post their numbers, like salespeople, like they're just like really, really proud of the work that they're doing, and they wear that badge. They're proud of it. They're proud of being a salesperson. And I saw that that was something that became pretty important. The other thing too, I think from how we retooled things, it was the job description was really important, but the biggest change we made was in the process and really being thoughtful around what do we want these people to be? What are these core competencies? Like what makes sense for the team? Like what does the team have now and what is it missing? And how do we kind of merge these two groups together? And then really spending a lot of time with my head of people. Her name's Marjorie, and another a recruiter whose name is Madalena. I mean, spending the extra time to like teach Madalena the pitch. She's the first contact point. Like how can I make sure that she's fully like can answer all the questions that she's going to get asked. Treat her like someone on your team, and then do the same thing with everybody that you want on that interview panel. So I have like 6 people that I go to, and people will talk through 4 or 5, and and we've been told by some of the folks that we've ended up hiring, and even some of the folks that we haven't hired, they've just been like, your process is really buttoned up, and that's a great experience for me, especially in this strange virtual, kind of environment. So I think I think it's the whole thing, and it is a lot of work. I mean, in a good way, but it is rewarding and fulfilling because I've actually, it's funny, my last company I worked at, I can see the Webb book behind you, but we were like really, really buttoned up and disciplined about the interview process to make sure that and you take that time, and we weren't there yet. That's another one of those operational things. We just weren't there yet, and now we're really doing it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, I want to go back to when you were an individual contributor, because one thing, speaking of LinkedIn profiles, that stuck out to me was that you moved into a leadership role, management role, relatively early in your career. I think it was 6 years. I think you were graduated college, I think in 2000, and by 2006 you were a rep and then became a manager. And I'm wondering, how did that opportunity come about? And what do you remember about those early days from making that transition from an individual contributor to manager? What did you sort of struggle with? And then talk to me a little bit about that.
Jay, you're aging me a little bit. But so I had a really incredible opportunity. So I got started on the advertising side of things. So I worked at an ad agency. I moved into sales in 2003 and had some early decent success, and then I switched kind of like the medium I was selling and had miserable failure. And I retooled, and then I kind of got back into the digital where everything was going. But I had a great opportunity. I worked for a guy who's actually been on your podcast, Sean Reeksecker at Centro, and I got to spend 11 years with him. And so I joined him in 2006 as an individual contributor, and really a lot of similarities to like when I joined Centro and when I joined formerly known as Alpha, which was, we got a really good idea. We have some really good salespeople. What are we going to do to light some fire and throw some gasoline on the fire? So those early days of Centro 2006 to 2009 were wild. I mean, we had, there was about 4 or 5 of us that were really just, selling 10 million plus a year, which was crazy. I got the opportunity to do 2 things. One, move into a leadership role in 2009, but I had to actually move out to California. So I moved out to California. I took over our West Coast, which was kind of a region that was losing people. They were losing customers. So it was really kind of a parachute rescue operation. So what do I remember? I remember that I wasn't very good. So I remember I was I was a really good salesperson that was a pretty average manager, because I didn't know what kind of manager I was going to be. So it was there were highlights to it, but it was kind of like there was so much new. It was like new market, so I didn't have the roots of Chicago where I knew the whole community. And it was a very different environment. I I remember I wore like a suit pants and a jacket to a meeting, and this woman was in flip flops, and she's like, "You're definitely not from around here." And I was like, "All right, this is my welcome to LA moment." But um, I think I made the mistake that a lot of new sales managers make, which is be like me, do everything that way I would do it. And it's such an interesting juxtaposition, because like you did all these great things and it puts you in a position to get promoted, and then you have to actually turn most of that off. And like there almost should be like a detox period, but when like someone goes from a seller to a manager, where they just get all of that out of their system. You know, think about it. Like a great seller is driven by, you know, a couple of things. Hopefully it's about, you know, creating a great customer experience, but ultimately it's about they want to make money for themselves, and they like that control, and they have the flexibility and the freedom. Well, if you're a manager, you have now 4 or 5 people, or 3 or 4, or whatever that number is, and it's not about you. It's all about them now. And it's all about taking a vested interest in where they want to go and the career that they want to have. And you know, it's just a different mindset. It was really hard. And now I think I'm a better manager today because of that experience, though. You know, I've managed through some pretty turbulent, choppy waters. Whether it's, you know, that first kind of transition out west. We did some really cool experimental stuff at Centro that I got to manage through. You know, we kind of made a big shift in technology, which was really, really interesting and cool, but difficult. You know, as I moved, I actually came to Alpha, you know, now Feedback Loop. I came here as an individual contributor because I was like, I don't want to manage anymore. I just want to go sell. I also wanted to be like, there's so many great toys for sellers that, but you know, so I think all those experiences, you know, make you realize that there are some, going back to the fundamentals, there's some fundamentals about sales management that you have to abide by, and you can't just wing it. Like you can't just do random one-on-ones all week. You can't just pop into sales meetings. Like you can't just have like impromptu hour-long wasting people's time. Like you got to be really thoughtful. And I think all of that helped me get to kind of the point where I'm at, where it's, you know, I care deeply about the team, spend the right amount of time, you know, making sure that they're getting ramped and onboarded, and we are hiring the right type of people, not only that they've got great backgrounds, but they're great humans. And then also just like they being really intentional with your time and radically transparent about where people are at any given point in time. Beyond just, I'm either at this goal or here's my pipeline or whatever and whatnot. So
where did you realize that trying to duplicate little Matt Davis's wasn't going to work? Like
oh my God.
how early on did you say, all right, or were you sitting in a one-on-one with somebody and you're like, this is just not getting it done? Was it somebody like Sean that said, you know, hey, with his one-on-one with you that said, you know, this is how you should be thinking? Like, how did you improve, and where did that sort of?
There were definitely some great influences on helping me, you know, go. Sean was definitely one of them. I think where I realized is when I had to fire someone, and I let them go, and they were really surprised. And it was like, and they had some success, but they couldn't, the system that I set up, or that I was trying to set up, or I thought I was setting up, did not allow for their creativity, or their, you know, them being them and getting to their best self. It was like, you know, round peg, square hole, round peg, whatever. And you fire someone, and that's a big deal, and it sucks. And you know, and I felt like I failed, and that required me to just kind of sit down and go, what am I doing wrong? A big influence in my career is my dad, and he's a phenomenal manager. He's like the guy that you know, his employees or his coworkers will tell you that, like, when he was running his last company, he'd fire someone, and then the guy would like walk out of the building shaking hands with him and being like, "Thank you so much." And I could never figure out what the deal was there. What was the difference? Like, how come I was surprising people and how come he was? And it really came back to how often are you meeting with people to tell them where they're really at, and asking them where they think they're at, and what are you using to measure, and can people just access that information? And that's been a long road to develop that kind of, not to keep drumming the beat, but that feedback loop on people's career. Yeah. And this management coaching session is sponsored by Feedback Loop. So,
yeah, right.
But that's what you want. And that was tough. And I had to do it a couple times, and I realized it was just kind of that stark reality. It's like, I don't know how much of it is them. It's probably a lot of me.
So let me ask you this then, looking back at that, using that one particular situation, because when you said that, I had a very similar situation with me as well, where I had to fire a couple of people in a short period of time, and it didn't feel good. And really, they shouldn't have been surprised, and they were. So that was just a huge mistake on my part. And that I wonder if I were a better manager, or if I knew more, or if I had some sort of a stronger operational process, and I didn't expect them to be me, because, I don't know if I'll ever learn that lesson, I suppose, but like how, if you were to plug that person back into, let's say, the new Matt Davis's system, right? Would they have succeeded?
What a great question. And it's so interesting, because of course, like when you still manage people, like you think to yourself that every now and again, you're like, oh man, I wish they would have done something different. But you got to bite your tongue a little bit, or you just got to be really good at feedback. But are you open to doing this a little bit differently?
Right.
But so to your question is phenomenal. And I think it's one of those things where I tend to over-index on I can save you, or I can change you, and it is really, and I feel I don't like it. I don't like letting people go, and because I always feel like I could have done more. Now, the reverse of that, which is always so interesting, is that oftentimes when people get let go, at least my experience, and there is that surprise, it is actually, there's just there can be some low self-awareness, right? There can be that, they're not hearing like what's the feedback that's actually that's coming to them, and that's not always the case. But there is a balance. Like, there's nothing better than you have like a star performer and a star manager, and they spend a lot of time figuring out how they can, like, it's like a coach and a great coach. And
I just thought of Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson when you said that.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Which I am nowhere near any of that kind of talent, but that great harmonic working relationship, and the reason that they had such a great working relationship, that example, is that they just spent a lot of time understanding each other. And so I don't know if that person works in this, because when you start to peel the onion back, you're like, what are the things that led to that decision other than performance? Well, they weren't communicative, they weren't coachable, they didn't have any desire to be different. They weren't good to people internally. They were kind of mean, and whatever. I'm like kind of just generalizing, but you start to realize, you're like, man, I wish I would. You wish you would have always done it sooner. That rescue time is like not good for the company, and it's not. Most importantly, it's not good for the person. If you start to sense that somebody is struggling and you don't address it, and then you just let it kind of die on the vine, that is the worst thing you could do as a manager.
How do you start to coach people that are struggling on those soft skills, right? When they're not as communicative, they're not necessarily coachable. Like, are those things that, obviously, ideally, you catch that during the interview process, and, you either make a decision to hire them or not hire them. But, let's say somebody slips through, which of course they do. And now you want to invest in this person that you've made an investment in. So how do you coach those soft skills? Like, where would one go to sort of level up those skills that aren't necessarily like make 10 more dials a day, like those types of things.
Yeah, it's what's interesting? I think there's two scenarios. One, you hire someone and they're not necessarily like living up to their potential based on like what you thought you were getting. I have that. I have that experience less than I've taken over a lot of teams. Like I've kind of been put in charge of teams and taken over peer teams, and I think that's where you start to that becomes vitally important to spend the time to understand how they work. It depends. Like I think. So I want to I like creativity. I think the first thing you got to do if you ever want to try to coach someone on a soft skill or something that's like something about their personality or whatever, you really have to spend the time to make sure that they trust you, and that you're not just like a talking manager. Like, I try to talk and do, right? Like, and I'll never ask my team to do something that I don't know how to do. Like when we roll something out from a demo perspective, I'm the first to try to learn it and practice it, and I'll get on any client call with any with any of my team at any given time. Like I'll drop anything that's like a number one priority. But so you got to earn that trust, and then once you do that, I think you can be creative. If someone is talking a lot, right? If they go on monologues and which I'm doing on this podcast, but for the sales call, it's not quite as effective. You can say, do you, first of all, do you want to be different? That's you ask that question. Do you want this? Do you like that? Do you feel like you're getting your message across or something like that? And, if everyone's aligned, we're like, we all want the same thing. You to sell more, you to make more money, and you to, work on this one thing. And you can just do like, okay, word count, or let's time it, and then you practice. Like I will always take that extra time to practice, and like things like pausing, or like it's funny. I got feedback one time about how I am in meetings, and how sometimes because I'm so excitable, and like I'm just kind of like yes, it can sometimes shut other people out of the meeting. And so I have a little sticky note on my computer here, and it's just like, so things like that. So don't talk first, and so that's one way to do it, I think. But I think there's one more key to this thing, which is I'm really comfortable with talking about my like shortcomings as well. So, in that scenario where I have someone that's, let's say you have a scenario where they are not necessarily like what we call like audible ready. They're very like kind of like by the book, and they want to say the same thing and they reference the same stuff. And in that case, it's like you try to think about where does this person, like where's the creativity and how do you unlock it? And how do you get them in that mode and that zone of unlocking the creativity? So, it just takes time, but I'll share my things that I'm trying to do and trying to get better with, and I think that just creates like more of a an exchange. But if they don't want to change, then
Right.
there's not much you can do there.
Yeah, I wrote down that you said to build trust, and I was wondering how you could do that. But you're right. If you show your vulnerability and show where you're, where you're weak and what you're working on with them, then they tend to open up and be more receptive to what you're sharing with them.
I'm pretty, and I've just found, I think that going back to like old Matt manager versus like kind of where I am today, I'm just a lot more comfortable with the mini failures, right? Like I don't like failure, obviously, but I'm just a lot more comfortable with like, hey, I messed up. I went over my skis. I didn't do that very well, or and I'll call it out. And I think that creates an environment where people can actually like share with each other. I'll give you another example, which I think is pretty cool. When I think about a sales team, I think about a team. Like I really do. Like I want people that care about each other, but also they go and they achieve their goals, but they're not jerks, right? They want everybody to kind of be working to help each other. I feel pretty fortunate that the team I've got now, nice mixture of new and old. That's how they're operating. And one of the ways we do that and how I know that there's like trust in the group is that we do game film, similar like you'd see in the NFL, like every Wednesday we take an hour and like do round robin, and a seller will put their call on, and we listen through Gong, and then everybody listens, and we time box it, and we just basically give the good, give the bad, and then we talk about like help them come up with like next steps and plans. So much in fact that I'll do it too. Like I've done a couple of the sales calls that I've been on that I've led, and it's a humbling experience having the team be like, well, here's what you could have done better, and that joke didn't really seem like it landed, and did you really ask for next steps? And it's just funny getting all that advice played back, but the team feels comfortable enough with each other to give each other feedback, and that's pretty cool.
I think part of that goes into security and insecurity as an individual, as a manager. In other words, probably, and like you alluded to, that most young or early in their career kind of managers are probably less secure because they just became a manager. Maybe they just took over an existing team where there was another manager or another leader. There's probably inherent distrust. Can this guy really, get me to where I want to be? Whatever. And then I think you start pressing a little bit because you're, maybe not all that secure in some of the decisions that you're making. And it can be a struggle, for sure.
You're immature, for sure. Right. Like, I thought I was really hot, and then, and then you come on and I'm like, wait, why don't they think that? This is weird. Like, did they not see my record? Like, I don't understand this. Like, I moved out here, and do they not know who I am? It was like, then, you realize you're like, nobody knows you. The clients don't know you. You have no brand recognition. And I realized, I was like, man, that's not good. The other, so you get older. So we get older and you have more experiences, and it gets kind of, you start to, you lose the ego part. You don't lose the competitiveness, but you lose the ego, and you lose like this, I want the credit mentality. You start to, at least for me, what's been really cool is that I'm way happier if someone succeeds on my team because of something that I was able to help with than my own personal like glory. And so I try to, that's kind of how I think about, like, that's one of the things when we do onboarding, we talk to the team. I'm like, here's how I like to work. Like, are you the type of person, if something goes wrong, what do you do? And are you pointing a finger at everybody else? Or are you just kind of taking the brunt of it and protecting the team? Like, are you giving credit when the credit comes in, or are you trying to take it? Like, those are, they're diametrically opposed, but it's really important. And I think if I could have never done that at, what was I, 29 at the time. I was just dumb.
Yeah, I'm so glad I'm not alone with all that, because there's so much that I've experienced since then that I would never do again. How about, there's a lot of people that are listening to this podcast and that I talk to who want to move into, from an individual contributor role to a manager. Do you need to be the best person on the team in order to become a manager? And if not, what other things should they be doing as individuals to position themselves to have an opportunity the way that you did?
That's a great, I might have to have you repeat the second part in a second here, but I'm thinking about, so is it advice, or does it have to be the best person? Is that kind of like the whole thing wrapped up?
Yeah, sorry, that was a loaded question.
No. It was really good. It just got me like, I just started thinking about it.
Yeah, no, it's like, does the best person always get promoted? In other words, you need to be the best salesperson in order to get the opportunity. And if you're not the best salesperson, what else can you rely upon or do to position yourself in a way to get the opportunity to interview for a leadership role?
That's great. So you may not have to be the best, but you have to hit your goals. You have to be a performer. Otherwise, no one's going to respect you. You have to you have to at least have some sort of sustained success, and that's why it's sometimes difficult to hire managers from the outside. And there's a whole, you could probably do a whole podcast on like what's the best thing, promoting within or bringing some from out. There's goods and bads of both, but it's interesting. And I'll just speak from my own experience. So when I got here, it's a feedback loop. I was selling and I closed a relatively large deal, and then I got the opportunity to move into management again, which is something that I was really excited about from a new logo perspective. But it was the same kind of thing where it's like, was I the best at the time? Like, no, there were people that have sold more. Was I probably the best fit for the role because of my experience? Maybe. But it's interesting. Like, I don't know, what you would ask one of your, when we were getting ready for this, you'd ask like, what advice would you give people that want to get into management? I said, don't do it. And I was just kidding, but like, you got to really understand that it's not just an extension of, I think most people want to get into management because they feel like they're going to have a seat at the table, or they're going to have more information from marketing, or they're going to be able to have a much more influential thing, or it's like big for their career. And I say, yeah, maybe that's right. But that's ego driven. And in order to be a great manager, you got to let that go. And so that kind of is, they contradict each other. And I also think like if you're selling something and you're helping customers and you're making a lot of money, it really becomes a matter of like, it's just, do you want to continue that run and making more money? Because ultimately there's, you have the the one of the most important jobs, especially in a startup. And, that's the highest risk. That's why you make good money. The risk becomes a little bit more evenly distributed as you move into management. Therefore, the earnings are not necessarily they're not necessarily as great. Like I want my salespeople to make way more than me. But so I guess to answer the question and then kind of tie it up, I'm really think about it. Like really think about, talk to managers, talk to other managers, like call people, like LinkedIn with people, like just talk about what that transition's like. Cause I'm pretty sure most people have had that pretty similar experience than I do. I mean, there's books written on this about the transition. And honestly, like most companies don't put a lot of they do think about a lot about onboarding, but they don't think a lot about management training or transition training. And it's I think a lot of new managers kind of get kind of like they're flailing in the wind, and maybe that's like an old secret, that this is like how you become a good manager. Like let them flail for a while, and then they'll finally figure it out. And for those that don't, they just go back. But yeah. I don't know.
Yes, it's always very interesting because to your point, I think a big part of it is your motivation for wanting to get into management. And one of the things that frankly shouldn't be a motivation for getting into management is because you're tired of being a hunter, or you're,
No. Like if anything, prepare for a few things. One is, sometimes salespeople are unruly, and they're interesting creatures, and it's why I love it and I love managing it. But you got to really, they're very individual. Like everyone's got unique things, and I feel pretty fortunate that I've got a group of people I get to work with that are really unique. They're not all the same. There's some diversity there, and with personalities, and so I think prepare for a little bit of therapy. Like you're gonna need to kind of figure out exactly what makes these people tick. I think prepare for more meetings. Like a good, at least in my perspective, a good sales manager, or at least frontline sales manager. You got to have the pulse of the customer, right? So like I have a duty to not only understand what the customers are thinking, but I got to give that feedback back to our executive team, our marketing team, and I got to let people know what's working, and I can't do that by word of mouth. Like, I'm just going to sit here behind a spreadsheet and then just hope that people keep telling me. Like, I need to experience it. And I think the last piece of advice is prepare for more internal meetings. You're gonna have to do a lot of those as a manager, but that's part of the rhythm. And making sure that your boss, whoever your boss is, CRO or CEO in my case, it gives you the is well aware and transparent of the prioritization of that operating rhythm. And that helps you kind of protect and keep that customer focus. But yeah, I agree with you. Like it is really interesting the way you asked the question too, because I have had people, not in this experience, but I've had people come to me and they're like, I really want to get into management. And I'm like, well, what kind of management? Because it wouldn't be sales management, because you have to sell things to get, it's like you kind of have those people that are a little disconnected with
right,
what's actually going on. But.
Yeah, interesting. Yes, so true, so true. Well, we're at the portion of the interview where I have what's called the rapid fire 5.
Nice.
You ready for this?
Yes.
All right. I ask 5 questions. Give me 5 answers. Just helps us to get to know each other a little bit more.
Great.
Okay. Or the audience to get to know you a little bit more. What are you most excited about right now, either personally or professionally?
So I'll take it in 2 answers. Personally, I've never enjoyed the weekends as much as I do right now. I live by myself, and I get to it's the creativity flows, or just like, hey, I want to watch the Masters for 2 straight days. It's like there's just like, I look forward to the weekend. I don't know why, it's like a totally new thing for me. Professionally, honestly, like it's my team, like the people that we brought in, and I'm starting to see people, really gel, and I'm starting to see a lot of that work come together. Now it's externally, whether it's our product or how we talk about our company, and that gives me a lot of, I think we're going to grind through Q4, but I'm pretty excited for 2021.
Awesome.
Much like probably I'm sure everyone is.
I was going to say, I think you're not alone in that, in that sentiment. Speaking of 2020, what activity do you miss most since the pandemic arrived?
I haven't left. So pre-pandemic, I was traveling every week. Post-pandemic, I've been on 1 trip. Like, surprisingly, like, I hate to say this, I miss airports. Yeah, I miss traveling. I miss the experience. I miss even just getting annoyed at TSA. Like, it's like nonsensical rules that and I'm flying somewhere this weekend, and I'm like I had to literally put something in my calendar that says, remember how to travel.
I thought you were gonna
It's like, because I don't remember how. I'm like, oh my God.
You also better remember to take a mask. I thought that's what you were going to say. Remember your mask.
I mean, I have my masks like just right at my door. Like when I leave my apartment, because we have to have them in our building too. So
yeah,
totally. Yeah, absolutely. It's important.
Amazing. What do you want to get better at right now?
How long is this podcast?
Do you extend it?
Yeah, this is the extended version. This is the remix. I'd like to get better at, what would I like to get better at? I have a lot of people in different places, right? I have seasoned people have been here that, have been working some deals for a while. I have 2 people that are about here for a month. I've got 2 people that are, that are just getting going. That can tend to get me into a space where I lose sight of the different rhythmic things that I'm doing. And so I need to take that time. I need to catch those kind of moments a little bit earlier. And, I think that's something that I'm getting better at, but I still need to continue to work on, is that just like catching the things earlier so that I can reset and adjust and correct in like a couple of days time, not a couple of weeks time.
Yep, that makes sense. I understand that. What keeps you motivated?
I mean, I've got a good engine. I am pretty positively oriented. So, I think good human interaction is motivating to me. I think really truly when a customer gets like what we do and how it can help them really quickly, that's like incredibly inspiring to me. And then ultimately the biggest inspirations, I have two nephews, one's 3 and one's 1, and they're adorable, and they're also wildcats, so it's they keep me on my toes, but they're kind of my refuel if I need to, that weekend jolt. I'm like, I go spend some time with them, and it's pretty cool.
Give you there your dopamine hits.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly right.
That's right. And question number 5 is, can you share a piece of advice or tool that helps you stay productive?
Yeah. So I have an app. It's only on the mobile. Well, it's on both, but it's on mobile. It's called Good Task. And Good Task is by far, at least in my opinion, I love to-do lists. I think everybody probably has some form of this, and what I love about Good Task is it makes it really easy to schedule when it's due. So like it has like a little grid. You just type it in, you can put subtasks in it really simply, and then you can just prioritize it. And it kind of does all these things that other people don't, other apps like that don't do. So that I kind of live off of that from an organization standpoint. Outside of that, like people laugh at me because my calendar, I'll have things like call mom on Monday night. So, it's like call mom, like, remember that you have dinner to cook, it's like, so because I don't care if someone sees that stuff. So, I think that's my backup plan.
Funny, I have things like that on my calendar too. It's like floss. Like,
Yeah.
I have all
Yeah,
those.
I'm guilty. I'm guilty of that. Yeah. Take a shower today. Get ready. You have a podcast to do. Make sure you look presentable.
Breathe. Yeah, it's like if it's not on my calendar, it's good luck. Like I need to actually, it has to be there. Otherwise, I won't do it. Something as simple as flossing and those types of things. I wrote down Good Tasks because I'm always looking for little apps like that. Like the iPhone task list is terrible. It's like it's just awful.
It's brutal. It's brutal. It's and this is kind of like the subtle other thing I love about the noises it makes. Like it's like boop, boop, and it's just like it has like this kind of nice ring to it. So I enjoy it. I'm like, I got it done. Yes.
Yeah, a reminder without being intrusive or obnoxious. Sounds
Exactly.
like, yeah, that makes sense. Actually, sorry, I lied. One other question. How can folks get in touch with you, follow up to say thank you? Perhaps maybe they want to become a part of that rocket ship that you're building over there known as Feedback Loop?
Yeah, so 2 ways. First, my email, matt.davis@feedbackloop.com. I can also be found on LinkedIn at it's like LinkedIn, Matt Davis 0503. I'm always available. Please reach out. I think if give me a second, I got to kind of sift through a lot of vendor emails every day. But yeah, LinkedIn is the best way probably, and email as a backup. But I'd love to hear from people.
Are you hiring, by the way? Do you want to promote any openings that you have?
Yeah, so I mean, we're hiring in a couple different spaces, but right now I am hiring. I've got a new logo account executive role that I'm pretty constantly interviewing at a given time for. So that's available on our website. You can just go to the careers page of feedbackloop.com.
And remember to put something about the Overquota podcast in the subject line, guys, so that you break through the clutter of his vendor emails and everything else, and appeal to his need to be heard, if you will. Yeah. Right.
Jay, this was an incredible experience, man. It was awesome to spend the time with you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. This has been great. I'm excited to share it with everybody and to get the feedback from everybody. Thank you, everybody. Cue the music.